Today I'm going to be kicking off another reading vlog where I read a couple anticipated new releases. You're talking to future Ashley here. I've actually already completed the vlog, so I am just here to very quickly tell you what I'm going to be reading and kick you back in time to the beginning of the vlog. If you've been keeping up with my videos, you know I have a lot of ARCs I'm trying to get through right now, which are advanced reader copies that I received through NetGalley. I did a reading vlog earlier in February, and then this was the part 2 of that, and I had a lot still on my radar, so I asked all of you which ones you'd be most interested in, and I curated that list to put these books together and put this vlog together. So in this video, I'm going to be reading 3 books. The first is Piñata by Leopoldo Gout. This is a horror book that is said to be Hereditary meets A Head Full of Ghosts. Then I'll be reading Not So Perfect Strangers by L.S. Stratton. This is a psychological thriller that is loosely based on Strangers on a Train, which is a story about these 2 strangers who meet each other and agree to commit crimes for one another so the crime cannot be traced back to them. And then finally, I'll be reading What Happened to Ruthy Ramirez by Claire Jimenez, which is about this Puerto Rican family who one of their family members when she was 13 years old went missing, Ruthy Ramirez, and all these years later, one day the sisters and the mom think they see her on a reality TV show and they decide to go pursue that to see if that could be her. And with all that being said, I will go ahead and kick you back in future to the beginning when I was starting Piñata. Cannot really be sure why I have decided to stand for this clip and be at this angle, which I have never been at before ever, but I just felt like standing for this. So hello, new angle to my room. I have started Piñata. I started this last night and I am about 1/3 of the way through the book. I've made it to about page 100 and there's right under 300 pages in the book. So I thought it'd be a good place to do like a 1/3, 2/3 and final update with this one. So far the pacing of the book is much different from what I expected it to be. Based on the synopsis, I thought this book was going to very briefly be set in Mexico and then spend a lot of time in the aftermath once the family has returned back to New York and they brought some dark presence with them. But at this point, 100 pages in, we're still in Mexico. So it does spend quite a bit of time there. I'm not upset with that, but it was just very different from what I expected the book to be. And it has had a much bigger, slower build up, but I am liking it. I'm like everything we're learning about the different cultural aspects related to the book and the different people they're meeting there. And it's just giving you time to get to know these characters. You're getting to know Carmen as a mom, you're getting to know Isel as a daughter, and you're also getting to know Luna as a daughter, and they're all just so different, and it really has given you time to really get to know who they are and not just throw you into them experiencing these circumstances without having that context. I still think the book could have been done that way, but anyways, I'm just saying I'm not mad that it's kind of a slow build up. I also think the writing style is super good so far. I'm really feeling like I'm getting to know these characters, I'm getting to know the setting. I really just feel like it's written super well. This author's writing style is very compatible with what I like to read, so that is working out really well. But yeah, so far for the setup of the story, all that has really happened is we're following Carmen and her 2 daughters, Isel and Luna, as they're spending time in Mexico while Carmen is there working on leading a project. She works in architecture in some capacity, but there are some particulars about her role on the assignment versus the foreman, the contractors, and all of the other things, and it's becoming a big issue because she's like a foreigner. Technically she's from Mexico, but she lives in New York now and has spent, I think, a lot of her life in New York, and so they see her as sort of an outsider, and she is a woman, and so she's facing complications with getting the project done. Anyways, they're restoring an old church and turning it into this fancy hotel, so that's the project she's working on, and she has brought her daughters along with her. Isel, I think, is like 16 and Luna's around 11 to 13-ish, and Isel is not happy about being there. She is very much an angsty teenager who just wants to be with her friends at theater camp, and Luna is just having the time of her life and just loving getting to know the culture and exploring and meeting people. So that's what's going on with them. And then there is another character who was introduced that I wasn't expecting, named Yoltzi, and she is this young woman who has been kind of keeping an eye on them because she sees spirits and she is seeing seeing something that could potentially be coming and causing danger on the younger sister Luna, and she wants to try to warn them. So you're getting that dynamic in there as well. And yeah, they're still in Mexico, but pretty soon I know they're going to end up going back to New York because that is what the synopsis says. And then this thing is going to be following them to New York. And so I'm curious to see how all of that is going to play out. I'm very excited to get some movement going in the story because it has been a slower build up, but so far so good. Loving the characters, loving the writing, and it is definitely creepy so far. Hello, we have once again found ourselves in this standing position because my overhead light in this room is now broken. So I have to be near the lamp and it's very dark because it's nighttime. But I have to update you about Piñata because I'm almost done. I only have 70-ish pages left in the book. Very close to finishing, and I'm about to finish when I go to bed. And I haven't updated you on my midway updates yet, so needed to talk to you before I finish. I am enjoying this book. My only qualm with it is not surprising in any way, shape, or form, because it really just plays out exactly how you expect it to and how the synopsis lays it out, and that is not super exciting to me. I do like the characters, I do really like the family. This kind of reminds me of The Spite House by Johnny Compton, which I read recently, which is about a dad and his 2 daughters, and they go live in this haunted house, and he will do anything to protect his daughters. And in this story, you have a mom and her 2 daughters and this spirit thing following them around and what she's doing to protect her daughters. So it just really reminds me of that book in a way. But this one is just, unfortunately, not as fun as I wanted it to be because it's all just going exactly to plan. So it's not a bad book, but I personally like to be surprised by my stories, and this one is just so very, very, very predictable because it's just doing exactly what the synopsis said it would. So that's how I feel as of now. I guess the ending still could come out with a big bang and surprise me or do something risky or do something bold. So we will see, but I'm gonna go finish it now and I will let you know what I think in the morning. Good morning. I am not feeling 100% today. Hence the PJs, why my voice might sound kind of weird. Just everything you're seeing right now is a result of me not feeling 100%. But I did finish Piñata last night and I did want to tell you about it while it was fresh and before I start the next book, because even when I'm not feeling well, I still will be reading. In fact, I will probably be reading even more because I am feeling unwell. I was thinking about it when I finished this book, and I feel like it's time to have another talk about my ratings. I talked about this not too long ago, couple months ago, that I was going to stop rating every single book that I read, and I wanted to do that to challenge myself to talk more about the book instead of falling back on a rating, and also because I kept finding myself in this pitfall of if a book was a 3-star, which seems like a good thing because if you're on a 5-star scale, 2.5 is right in the middle, 3 should be like, it was a good book, but I would find myself talking about 3 stars like they were a disappointment because it was not a 5. And so I just spent some time not rating books as much, and I've been doing a little bit of ratings, like when a book is a clear 5-star, I've been telling you, but for the most part it's been kind of less about ratings and more about me telling you how I feel about the books. But I've started to like pick back up giving ratings a little bit more, and interestingly, nobody really said anything about me not rating books. I was really expecting people to be upset by that. I thought people had this expectation of reviewers, or I guess I don't even really call myself a reviewer, booktubers, creators who talk about books. I feel like people have this expectation for you to give a star rating, and so I thought people were going to be annoyed by that, or like all up in my comments saying, what the heck, how am I supposed to know what you think about books if you're not putting a rating on it? But nobody said anything at all. I didn't have a single comment of anyone being frustrated by that, and it was so liberating. I felt like it was so nice to be able to just talk about books like that, and I feel like that's almost why I eased back into giving ratings more often. I feel like recently I've been throwing my ratings out there a little bit more than usual, but now I feel like I'm falling back into the same pitfalls because I finished this book and thought, oh, well, that was just a 3-star. And I don't want to feel that way. I want to enjoy books that are just good as well. So yeah, that was all a really long tangent for kind of nothing because I don't really think I'm going to change anything. I think sometimes I will keep giving ratings when it makes sense, and I will not give ratings when I don't feel like I have a rating to put on it. And I do want to continue to force myself to, or not force myself, but like to push myself to talk about books in a more complex way than just throwing a rating on it and calling it a day. That could definitely change in the future. I am a human being. I change my opinion. I change the way I do things. So I don't know. It's just a journey. We're figuring out what we're doing here. But with this book, it did just kind of feel like like a solid 3-star for me. I did enjoy it. I did have a good time with it. I think the storytelling was really well done. I think the writing was amazing. The characters were amazing. These felt like real people. This is an author I will definitely be reading from again. However, I did have pretty high expectations for this book because one, the cover is incredible, which I know, don't judge a book by its cover, but I can't help it. When I see a cover like this, I just have high expectations that I'm gonna love it because I love the cover so much. Also, this book was being marketed as Hereditary meets A Head Full of Ghosts by Paul Tremblay. That is one of my favorite horror movies of all time and one of my favorite horror books of all time. So I thought this would be like a perfect mash of that and be just for me. Like, I thought this book was going to be exactly up my alley of what I wanted. And I feel like the main pitfall of why this book wasn't the most wonderful experience for me was exactly what I talked about in the last update, in that it was very predictable because the synopsis just tells you what's going to happen, and that is just what happens. You do get a couple other characters that you don't anticipate in the synopsis and their perspective on things, but I didn't feel like that added anything that was really surprising. Like, the story still went exactly how I expected it to go, and I am personally a reader who wants to be surprised in some way. So this one ended up being good for me, but not great. I do recommend it. It also has a lot of cultural background in it, and there's a lot of cultural aspects that are brought into the story as well that I thought were done really well and had me interested in Googling to learn some things and see some visualizations of the different types of spirits that were mentioned in this book. And so I do like it when a book inspires me to go do my own research and gets me invested in the world of the story, so I thought it did a good job at doing that as well. And really my only complaint is that I wasn't surprised. So that ended up being a pretty good experience, I guess, if my only complaint is just I want him to be more surprised. So like I said, I do recommend it. I don't think comparing it to Hereditary or A Head Full of Ghosts makes a whole lot of sense. I see the elements that inspired both of those things, but I don't know. I just feel like that wasn't the best comparisons for what to expect with this book. It's going to be exactly what the synopsis tells you, so if that sounds interesting to you, I think you're going to enjoy the book. I don't know which book I'm going to be reading next, but you are about to find out, so cue the title card. I am 40% into Not So Perfect Strangers, and I am really enjoying it. So I was really excited to sit down and tell you about my first impressions of the book. Very opposite from Piñata, this is a book where the synopsis only tells you a little teeny tiny bit about what the book is about, and then there's so much more to learn and uncover throughout, and I love that. I love surprises in books, so I'm really enjoying how it was set up, and it gave me this expectation of what I thought the story was going to be, and then I'm getting so many more little aspects that are just fun little additions to the story. So the setup of the story is you're following these two women, Madison and Tasha. Madison is a wealthy white woman who is married to a wealthy white man, and Tasha is a black woman who is married to an abusive husband, and she has a son, and she's trying to run away from him, but her son still loves his dad, and so she can't quite get away from him. Her situation is truly awful, incredibly abusive, and incredibly difficult to read. Madison's situation is a different lens for sure. She thinks she's in this really awful situation with her husband, but there's also just a lot of awful things about her that come to light as you are reading throughout the story. I feel like if you just hear that without knowing any of the context, it's gonna sound like I'm like excusing a man's bad behavior because a woman is a bad character or whatever, but like no, there's just like a lot more going on there than what I thought it was going to be. I thought they were both going to be in like similar types of abusive relationships, but like it's just a very different situation with what Madison has going on in her life and how she chooses to navigate her relationship. And so they're very interesting foil characters to watch throughout the story and to see what happens as they come into each other's lives. There's also a little bit of a time jump aspect to the story as well. When the story begins, you're following them as they're initially meeting, how they come into meeting with one another and starting to get to know each other, and then you get a flash forward in some time too to when something tragic has happened, and then you kind of start seeing both sides of the timeline, which I was not anticipating, and I really like that too because you're seeing some things going on in the future, or I guess it's called the now in the book, and then you know you go back to the past, but for me it's the future because I think more about them meeting as being the present day, but whatever. Either way, you learn some things based on that situation that makes you really interested to get to those past segments and to understand how they got to where they get to. So I'm really liking it. It's really fun. It's keeping me on edge. It's making me fly through the pages really really quickly. It's really engaging. I like the characters. I like the writing. I like everything about it. So I'm having a really good time. So I'm going to keep on reading and I will check in with you again once I am farther in the story. Hello. I did finish Not So Perfect Strangers because it was just so good. It was so fun. It was so fast paced. It was so readable. I just couldn't stop to update you again. I just read the whole rest of the book. This one was such a fun, fast-paced, domestic, psychological thriller. I really recommend it if you like books like that. It was just really well done. This kind of follows like a runaway train type plot where the story just sets itself up and then you just see the chaos unfold. And it's also kind of like a cat and mouse game where you're watching these two characters try to get ahead of one another. And I really just love thrillers like that. It keeps it so fast-paced, so fun. It was just a good time. What this book also did really well was just developing these characters. I talked about this in the last clip, like it's such good foil characters to really just highlight the differences between them that are caused by their differences in race and class and privilege. And it was just done so subtly in such a nuanced way, just in like these little moments you'd see with the characters and their thought processes. And it was just done really well. This kind of felt like, and I don't know if this is the case, but like to me, what this felt like was almost like a response to a lot of these Good for Her books that tend to feature these white women protagonists who are going off doing some vigilante shit, killing these bad men and face no consequences for it, which don't get me wrong, I tend to enjoy those books as well, but there is this conversation to be had about like how, first of all, those are unrealistic, but a lot of thrillers are unrealistic, so you know that's okay. But this felt like a response to show like, okay, here's a white woman who's going off and doing that, and here's what happens when it is a woman of color or a black woman who is also in a horrible situation and doesn't have the privilege to be able to just knock people off and not face any consequences or not fear the consequences or not fear what's going to happen to her son being a black teenage boy going around doing things. Like it's just such a different landscape. And again, like I don't know if that was necessarily the author's intention and if she's read a lot of these Good for Her thrillers and thought of that and was intentionally doing that, but as someone who has read those, it felt very much like that's what this could have been, and I thought that was just done really well and it was just very good. The only thing that would hold me back from like an absolute 5-star is I didn't feel like I was fully surprised with different things. Like it felt like there were trying to be these little moments or reveals. There was some things that were surprising, like the full end I didn't have fully figured out, but I felt like this book would have been really good if it had a big plot twist in it. I felt like it had potential to do something that was a big twist, which I didn't feel like it did. It had some like small twists, small reveals, and I felt like it would have been really good if I had a big plot twist too. So that's just a personal thing, but otherwise really good, really solid. Highly recommend it. I will also check in really quickly right here with you again on the next book I'm reading, What Happened to Ruthy Ramirez, which I started last night, and I only got 11% in, so this is a very first impression of the book. But even from the first page of the book, I was like, oh my gosh, is this gonna be a 5-star? The writing is so amazing. Like these characters have such voice. There's so much emotion through the words. You can feel the grief these characters are going through. This is a story about this family, and one of the girls in the family went missing when she was 13, and now the sisters think they see her on reality TV all these years later, and they're gonna get together to try to go see if it's really her. And you can just like feel the grief in these characters. They feel so real. They feel like they have so much history between them. Oh my gosh, it's so good. It's so good so far. So I just wanted to let you know, this could be a 5-star. Who knows? We'll see where the story ends up going. Only 11% in right now, but I am planning on reading a lot today, maybe even finishing it today because I do think it is a shorter one. So yeah, that's my very first impression, and we will see where it goes from there. Okay, good morning. I finished What Happened to Ruthy Ramirez last night because I'm getting ready to travel and I had to hurry up and finish the book so I can finish the vlog so I can get this to you before I go on a trip. I'll start this off by saying this book probably wasn't the best book for me. It is very, 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 very literary / contemporary fiction, very low on plot, very low on mystery, which I knew could have been a case. The way the book was described, I knew it was going to go on one of two paths. Either one, it was going to use the synopsis as a kickoff point and then really follow the plot, or two, it was going to be very slow, just character based, and the plot was going to be very, very minimal. And that is the direction that it took. So the concept of this story is, there's these sisters and their mom, and one of their sisters has been missing since she was 13. All these years later, they see someone on reality TV who they think is her, and then synopsis tells you that they're gonna go pursue that and see if it's her. So I figured it was either gonna be the type of story that it kicks off and then like immediately within, the first 15%, they're in the car and they're going and it's like all about the crazy adventure. That's not what it was. It was very much very, very, very slow, very character study based. You just get to know each of these characters, you get their POVs, and it's really more about the aftermath of this disappearance and how that's affected all their lives and the different ways that they are having to go forward with life, carrying all the different emotions from grief to guilt to loss. And I guess ultimately it's a story about hope, because they still are able to have hope all these years later to see this random woman on TV and have the spark of hope that potentially that could be her. I won't spoil for you the final direction the story goes. Obviously either that is her or that is not her, and I will not spoil that for you. But all in all, the book wasn't really for me. If I had to put a rating on it, it would be exactly in the middle, like 2.5, but that is just an enjoyment-based rating. That's not like a quality metric. I thought it was written wonderfully. The characters absolutely come to life off the page. They have so much voice behind them. I was talking about that in my initial clip. Like, that stayed true the entire time, how real these characters felt, and just how in-depth of a well-done character study it is on this family facing the loss of one of their members. And it really is just about the very human experience of that. Like, it's not about the mystery of where she went, or did someone take her, or did she choose to run away, and is this girl actually her? It's not about the mystery of that. It's not about the mystery of what the police did when she went missing and the detectives. I don't think police were mentioned a single time in the book. It is very much about this internal story of the family, and that was done really beautifully. But for entertainment purposes, it wasn't exactly what I was looking for. But if you like those slow-paced character studies, if you like emotional examinations of things like that, then I would recommend it because it was written well. I also think this was the author's debut, and it was really well written for a debut, and it's definitely an author that I would keep an eye out for and see what she's writing in the future, and if I'm interested in picking anything else up. So that puts a wrap on the reading vlog. It was a mixed bag this time around, as it usually is. I ended up with 2 books that I thought were okay and weren't necessarily great for me, but I don't regret reading. And then Not So Perfect Strangers by L.S. Stratton was definitely my standout of the video. And if you have similar reading taste to me and you're looking for fun thrillers, that is definitely a book that I would recommend picking up. Let me know down in the comments below if you're interested in reading any of these books or if I convinced you to pick them up. But that is it for me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video. Bye!